in talking about Clarence Thomas and the Supreme Court's ethics issue, uh, you had a point that said Hudeman, is it Hewittman hasn't worked for the Times since 2017. So how'd she capture the current gestalt so accurately? Because it hasn't changed since 2011 when she wrote the passage above, and I was like, damn. Somebody like we're gonna here's a powerful bit of writing to make it hit home.
Yeah, that was an entire reason actually that I included that article. There was one other. Obviously, I'll link these articles with the show notes for the show. But the other part of that article, so the article was just talking about Clarence Thomas's ethical issues are not the only problem with the court. It also referenced the same thing that I mentioned in another show about the popularity, or not popularity of the court, but the trust in the court and looking at them as being trustworthy and being an institution that should be looked at for guidance and everything else. It referenced that 25-ish% of American respondents in the Gallup polls that that I mentioned 2 or 3 episodes ago. And having the combination of those things just made for an interesting article. So I wanted to mention it for the sake of mentioning it, and I really didn't have anything else out of that one specifically.
Well, I was amused by it for sure.
I was as well.
So I guess this should be the big. I'll give you a break here for an edit point. I guess this can be the beginning of the show, and you tell me something about audio quality, because it's in the follow up. I would have thought this would have been like in the pre-flight, or this, maybe something that doesn't make it the show. But it looks like you wanted to be a part of the show.
Yeah, So I assume you've listened to last week's episodes again.
I did not yet.
Oh, okay. So I was just curious what you thought about the audio quality. So I was banging my head against the desk trying to figure out why I didn't always hear it while I was editing, but I always heard it when I bounced the project out of Logic.
Mm-hmm.
So I started doing some searching because the most recent show I was at my wit's end. I couldn't filter it out. Come to find out, sometimes Logic decides to just shit the bed when you export stuff and inject noise into a bounce.
Is this a known issue with Logic?
Known issue as far as users are aware, yes. But I was not aware previously. And the funny thing is, the way that you resolve it is just to choose a different file format and bounce your project, and then all of a sudden Logic is good to go again.
No, that's the dumbest.
Yeah.
God, I hate software.
So that's why I wanted to put it in the show, because one, it's really useful for somebody to know if they're using Logic that sometimes this can happen. And, we're running on, 125-ish episodes that I've edited in Logic without this happening. And then it was around episode, 130.
We went over 2 years without this issue. It was at the beginning of this year. It was, I think the first time I heard it was in January, from a January recording.
So hopefully at this point, I will now spot check edits after I export them as well, just to see if I hear any white noise. But hopefully at this point, we're back to good, decent audio quality for every show.
Well, I was going to say that the last few shows, you got it, you took care of it. So
yeah, it became more and more difficult to do, and that's why I was hitting my head against the wall, because I couldn't understand how I could be doing the same thing and getting such drastically different results. And lo and behold, it's because all of my editing was done in Logic. And then exporting it out, it was during that bouncing process that And I'm using the term bounce because that's what it is in Logic. When you export the project into an audio file, you bounce it. I'm sure there's a reason behind it from the audio industry. I don't know the reason behind it, but that's the terminology. And so it was during that process that it would happen. But there were 1 or 2 episodes where I did hear it in the native recording. So I know we've had a couple of things at play. I'm not going to say it's all 100% been Logic. A couple of times I do think we had gain-related issues with changing environments that contributed to it. But at the same time, that was not the root cause of the primary issue.
So, interesting thing. I looked to see when the last release of Logic was, when their last update was. It's 10.7.7, and it was released on January 26th of this year. And that coincides with when we started having the issue. So that just because it was released then doesn't mean that you updated your copy of Logic on your computer. But I was wondering if it. I know with the OS you're kind of. I can't. Well, sometimes you do it. You download beta on your personal, and so I just would Logic have been something you would have updated that when it came out, when you were prompted?
Quite possibly. I for point releases, I tend to be fairly ready to update at this point.
Yeah.
For full version releases, I was a lot more aggressive prior to
producing something.
Yeah, I think it was actually this release. It might have been the previous one. But I know as we've been doing the show, there was one release that came out that I had to then search and hunt for an audio interface that would work, which was what led to picking up the Yeti mic as a backup, since it used native core audio. And since then, I don't update the OS until I know that my audio interface has support for the OS, even though I haven't used the audio interface now in 6 months, maybe 8 months.
Are you recording on a Yeti?
I am.
Okay.
I saw you also dropped in a piece of follow-up.
Yeah, I just heard this line and I thought it was fun. So, after we had a good time talking about the vacancy in Fox's primetime show, Tucker Carlson tonight, last week or last recording, and I came across this. I like the title of the show, that all tucked up, and then I saw this tucked around and fired out. I was amused by that.
I actually hadn't seen that prior to you putting it in.
I want to say it was last week's host of The Daily Show that said it. I'm trying to remember what her name is. Desi Leidick. She hosted The Daily Show last week. She's been a correspondent on The Daily Show, and she was behind the desk. And it just feels like this year or after Trevor Noah left the show, it feels like every new, every weekly comedian host has had the best week of hosting the show, because there's just been a new gem for each one of them. And anyway, I think Desi Leidick, I think she's the one who coined her, or that's who I think I heard her say the phrase. So I was amused by it.
I know I mentioned in responding to your message about it, but Next Draft, are you familiar with that newsletter?
No.
It's an email newsletter. It's apparently one guy that does basically a editorial kind of write-up daily, and he had coverage of Tucker's firing, and every chance he got, he put Tuck in there as a verb specifically for the alternative word, and that's what sparked the idea for me. So I don't want to take full credit for it for sure, but I did not see that specific all tucked up phrasing elsewhere.
I'm gonna give it to her because I watched all of the fake news segments that from last week about it because one, she's hilarious, and two, it was great. It was great writing. Speaking of, I actually ended up watching Roy Wood Jr. Are you familiar with him? He's also a correspondent on The Daily Show.
I know the name.
Yeah, I watched his section of the he had like a 25 minute I don't know a keynote speak. I don't know if it was the keynote speaker at the White House Correspondents' Dinner this year, but he had a 25 minute at the podium talking, doing what you do, and he was hilarious. But what I did not know, that man's from Birmingham, Alabama.
I don't know that either.
Yeah, I think he was born here. He grew up here and in Memphis, and I think his mom still lives in Alabama. And I was like, oh, okay. I had no idea. I've been laughing at his jokes for quite some time, and he had one of the best ones I've ever heard. And he's like, you ever get to a place where it's got so many American flags that you're not sure how many American flags equal a Confederate flag? And I was pretty amused by that. But yeah, that was follow up and some rambling in a rabbit hole. Is it rabbit trail? Rabbit hole? Yeah, off topic. Anyway, you had a show topic for. Oh wait, you had. Wait, okay? So is Code of Ethics versus Human Decency versus Morals a follow up, or is it part of is it the topic?
So yeah, that's what came to mind as a potential discussion point, depending on how much we dug into the actual news out of the two articles. So I guess you mentioned. Well, you already mentioned the one piece that kind of that made you chuckle, right? So the original quote that was referring to was, and I'll quote, "The ethical conduct of the Supreme Court has been under growing scrutiny," Emery Huitman wrote. "Questions have been raised over Justice Clarence Thomas's appearances before Republican-backed groups and his acceptance of favors from a contributor in Texas, Harlan Crow, as well as over his wife, Virginia Thomas, and her job as a conservative advocate." And so that particular line was written in 2011.
Times have not changed.
Not in the slightest. But that particular piece prompted me to kind of think about the state of affairs in general with regard to the Supreme Court, which kind of led me back to the same conversation that we've had in various ways multiple times, and that is, what does it mean to be a decent human being? But then what does that mean in the scope of trying to not necessarily regulate behavior? That's not the way I want to think of it. But if you were attempting to be a decent human being, and there were like a humanity code of ethics, what would that be? What would that look like? And similarly, if there was a human code of morals, what would that look like? That was kind of where my mind went. And we can certainly take that and run with it, but we can also kind of micro-focus on the need for Supreme Court just code of ethics and standards, because both of them are potentially equally interesting conversations.
I feel like we've talked about the latter, and I think it's a very short conversation to say, yes, they do need to be held. Well, they do need. I would have, if you said to me, does the Supreme Court have a moral code or a code of ethics, I would have thought yes already that exists. Maybe not officially, but something that what's the word I'm looking for? It was a legal term, precedence. There would be a precedent of what would be okay and not okay, and when to recuse yourself, when not to recuse yourself. And the only problem, maybe that I thought they would have had was that some of them just don't know when to retire. But we talked about that already. But yeah, absolutely, these human beings need to be held accountable. And I think it leads us, it led us to, or it led me to think about like an even bigger question. Is just like, how many people are moral because of the construct in which, the societal construct in which they live in? And if they were able to be invisible, whether like actually physically invisible or in some way, they had free reign where no one was able to hold them accountable, how many people would continue to be moral?
My initial response there, my just this gut feel kind of, throw it out and see what thoughts maybe follow, would tend to default to that being an unanswerable question, because morality is very much a construct of the societal structure in the first place.
Yeah, but there are certain things without society we could say are morally right and morally wrong, such as, the taking of somebody's life when they don't, like a murder.
Well, you can, right? But you can also make the counter argument that because moral beliefs are inherently individualized, even though it's a social construct, it's still your individual belief that fuels what you identify as being morally right or wrong. You can make the counter argument that murder maybe is morally right in someone's mind.
Yeah, so I guess how do you, I guess, what is the thing that we're looking for? I guess being a decent human being might be the thing where that might not be based on a moral construct.
Well, part of why I broke it out into three areas is because I think all three have a certain amount of distinctness and all three have a certain amount of overlap that makes it for an interesting discussion. So being a decent human being is fairly subjective as well. But there's obviously a point there where you are aiming your behaviors at what makes a positive impact to people around you. That's kind of what we mean by being a decent human being in the first place. So if you take the idea of inherently individualized beliefs and perceptions as far as what is morally right or wrong, and add into that an influence that you're looking through the lens of being a decent person and projecting that to people around you, and then further recognizing that there's a general unofficial contract with society that you will theoretically behave in a contributing positive manner to society, you could make that a thing, but I kind of pivoted from that to, if you were to have a code of ethics for a society instead, what would that look like? That's how I broke it down. You could theoretically make 4 kind of regions out of that conversation. I just felt like that made it a bit too convoluted for what I was going for.
I guess, the thought that I had was, and this is all informed by the social moral construct that I've grown up in my whole life, and or what it defines what my sense of morality is. And it made me think that if we were to, if you could really get a understand how people would behave. I mean, you obviously have people that are opportunistic and try to, even though there is a society with a moral code, they step outside of that moral code and commit crimes and do things that are immoral and so forth. And oh man, when I say the word immoral, it makes me think of church. That's not how I mean it. But it makes me think. I would have expected, if there was a way to graph that against our sense of morality, you'd probably see a bell curve where most people, most people, I guess I don't know, would it be a bell curve? Anyway, the bell curve in the sense of like, these people aren't going to behave regardless of what moral societal construct exists. The most of the people in the middle will get away with as much as they can, and there's going to be some people on the other side that are going to behave regardless of whether or not they could or they would or would not get caught.
I think I would tend to agree with that. The interesting thing, or the other interesting thing that pops into my mind, is that we've kind of also answered this question about what would people gravitate toward or do if they were given that leeway to do so. When you think about, as referenced before, the Stanford prisoner experiments. And just thinking about the finding yourself in a position of authority and power over someone else and it being unchecked tends to bring out negative behaviors in people. Similarly, Lord of the Flies is a great thought experiment about the same type of concept. Orson Scott Card referenced it in Ender's Game in a couple of different ways. These are all things that, absent any of the other influences. So if you think about an individual's moral choices, absent any influence around guiding that toward decency or any kind of governance from an actual code of ethics or at least some structure of ethical behavior, we tend to see that moral thought or perception or sense of value be very fluid based on the whims and desires of the individual.
I'm not sure I had any sort of response for that.
I get that. My interesting thing is that I had a response in mind as well. So okay. I'll go ahead with that too.
Answer your own question, sir.
Yeah. The other piece of that makes it kind of a fascinating thing is that if you view yourself as a very strong proponent of certain moral beliefs, a certain character, is it actually your moral compass that is quote unquote guiding you, or is it the constraints of one of these other areas that's actually making you more strict and stringent about adhering to those moral principles? It's kind of a chicken and egg conundrum where there are plenty of people who are very adherent to what they believe to be these lines that you don't cross, and you espouse this certain level of I don't want to say moral superiority because that's not the word, but that's the first thing that came to mind. So maybe sense of virtuousness is maybe a better way to phrase it.
Piety.
Sure, we can go with that too. I just didn't. I mean, moral superiority just sounds bad, and it's not actually what I'm going for. I'm going for this. I absolutely believe in my belief, and I'm willing to die on that hill, so to speak. And so you have that level of adherence to this idea, but you have it within the scope of these other influences. If you were somehow able to remove these other influences, how often would you still have that strength of conviction?
Yeah. I think, well, I was going to say, I think we get back to that bell curve.
Yeah, as I was talking about it, I kind of think maybe it wouldn't be quite the delineation of like these people would try to get away with everything to these people would always follow whatever this virtuous thought is. I think it might be more absent controls. These people will just let their whims guide them. The majority of people in the middle may or may not adhere to specific things based on the controls in question. And then on the far end, it's more, as long as these controls are listed, these people will always follow them. Like, I do think that there's an element of there has to be either a sense of trying to be a decent human or some societal construct in order to have that strength of conviction for the top end of that curve. I
think so. I think I follow.
It's really tough to have that conversation, actually, in the abstract without being able to draw a bunch of stuff and kind of visualize things.
Yeah, you know, at the end of the day, there's no way to know. It's only everything is speculation and conjecture. Well, not everything. There have been experiments that were done. So,
well, the fun thing that renders the entire argument moot in the first place is that morality is purely a social construct in the first place.
Yeah.
We allow the individual to define what is morally right and wrong for the individual.
Yeah, I think everything that you can study or draw conclusion from all are based on the idea, based on it within this construct.
Could take it a step further and argue that a code of ethics is stronger than a moral code.
Yeah, actually, defining a code of ethics as being something that is set out and something that's chosen by a group of people.
Yeah, so a code of ethics isn't necessarily saying that you're always going to reach this bar, but this is the bar that you're going to set to attempt to always strive toward. And generally speaking, there's normally some sort of repercussion for failing to meet that bar.
We have a number of different ways set up for you to get in touch with us to provide feedback, ask questions, or just comment in about something we've discussed.
You can hit us up on Twitter or Instagram at untitled_hosts, or shoot an email over to untitled.hosts@gmail.com.
Or get in touch directly with Jesse at jthart.com, or get in touch with me, John, via telepathy.
If you would like to support our work or are interested in listening to our new after-show feed, head over to patreon.com/theUntitledPodcast and take a look at the options we have set up.
Thank you for listening.
We hope you've enjoyed the show.
And we hope to connect with more of you as we continue this journey.
That's a wrap.